Hello everyone. Moving on from our last video where we looked at VST amp rack, so the amp simulator built into Cubase. I wanted to show you how I'd perhaps, after I've recorded the guitars, look at EQing guitars, little techniques I've got to make the whole signal path, perhaps look at making a group channel for the guitars as well, so you can control all of your guitars with one fader. I've managed to find this, which is an old recording I must have done some time ago, but I've actually quad recorded the guitar, so I've got 4 separate recorded guitar lines. Now these were all recorded separately, so they're not just copied tracks, as you can see from the timing. Look, this one's way behind the actual beat right there, but I'm not too worried about that because it's just, we'll perhaps look at how we can edit that to bring it forward a bit, but it was to look at how I would mix with quad guitars. Perhaps you've got to be quite wary with quad guitars, because obviously we looked at yesterday just stereo guitars and panning them hard left and hard right, so just using 2 channels. When you're quadding it using 4, you can sometimes lose, you get a big wall of sound, even bigger wall of sound, but you can sometimes find in mixing you can lose perhaps a bit of definition, and certainly in the initial transient or the initial part of the impact of the note, so you've got to be aware of that. But there are tricks around this which we'll look at. So this is one I've done in quad. One technique if you've got 2 guitars, what I'd probably recommend is using 2 separate guitars to record. Therefore you're getting almost like a live band sound, of, because quite often guitarists in a band wouldn't use the same guitar, you'd get that kind of effect. But if not, and you've got the same guitar, obviously we're going to look at using different amplifiers in VST amp rack, which will give that effect. Perhaps moving the microphone on one so it's further back, and you haven't got to worry about phasing too much, because that's when you can have problems in recording, because these are pan left and right, so we haven't got to worry about anything like that. So that's, you know, good technique. Or perhaps even with the guitar using different pickups, so if you use a bridge pickup and a neck pickup for the left and right, can sometimes be quite good. It's not, you know, there's no rules with recording, which is one of the beauties of recording. You can make something your own, and there's no wrong or right way, which is I find, you know, quite exciting about recording. And while we're on that subject, when we looked at amp rack, of course I was saying it's a guitar amp simulator, but try on other instruments. Don't just think you have to stick it just on guitars. You can, sometimes it's quite nice to use say a Marshall with a bit of distortion on a part of a drum track or something like that, or to dirty up a track that's a bit clean. Even a vocal, you can use a distorted part. So VST amp rack's pretty good for things like that. The other thing I will say as well, don't forget to use your presets. If you're looking for doing something and you want to EQ and stuff, you want to EQ a vocal or you want to EQ a guitar, Cubase has got presets built into everything, and it's really good. And, you know, it's a starting point, so it gives you a starting point, and you can see what a ballpark idea of how someone would record or EQ a guitar, and then go from there. Okay, so this is an old track that I found laying around, so it's just a... just sounds like something with a few added knife chords, just a basic chord progression. Again, the way I'd have recorded this would have been, I'd have pressed monitor in, recorded it, you know, completely dry. As you can hear from there, there's no effects on it or anything, so I probably would have put an amp simulator on there just to give me a bit of comfort when I was recording, to give me an idea how it was going to sound. But as you can see, it's completely dry. One thing to do, remember, once you've recorded it, you want to hit listen back, take monitor off, because with monitor on you can't hear the signal, because it's only monitoring your input signal. So you've got to make sure monitor's off. Okay, and again, we discussed this in the last video, so if you're not sure of how to configure your sound card, go back into the earlier videos. But the reason I'm using right stereo in is because my card's set for stereo. The left hand side channel is set for my microphone, so if I had it on left in, it'd be recording my microphone. So the input channel on my card happens to be right, so that's why I'm using it on these channels. Okay, but if you get stuck with that, have a look at the earlier videos. Okay, so if I expand this out a bit, I'm only worrying about the first 2 channels to start with. Let's go back to where we were last time. So I'm going to F3 here, come into my inserts, and I'm going to go to distortion, load up amp rack, and let's do that on both of these. So distortion, VST amp rack. Okay, there we go. So we've got now quite a bassy sort of sound there. So we've got to obviously do a bit of EQing at the moment, because you have to think, well, if you're going to have bass guitar, which you probably will in a mix, you don't want the guitar and bass fighting each other. Bass is as important as the guitar in the mix, so we're going to probably take away a load of the bass. So even when you hear the guitars in isolation, they can sound a bit thin. But of course, once you've got the bass, and I'm going to show you how to I record bass as well with a distorted channel as well, you don't want those signals always fighting each other. Obviously, you get crossovers in signals where, you know, they're sharing the same frequency, but as much as possible, you want them to have their own space in the EQ jigsaw, as I call it. Okay, so let's have a look at, first of all, panning, because remember last time we looked at panning hard left and hard right to get a stereo image. And then I'll tell you what we'll do. Yeah, let's just grab an amplifier. So we looked at the pre-effects and stuff. So we loads of people on a pre-effect would use something like the Ibanez Tube Screamer to add a bit more input to the gain to the signal, and you can do that in here with this overdrive effect. So you don't have to have any drive on necessarily, and you can bring up the tone as you please to do the same sort of effect. So that will give a similar effect, and like a guitar pedal, you just click it on and off, and there he goes. So quite a handy thing. And again, sorry, I was just clicking on there. I forgot to say about the presets as well. By all means, look at the presets if you want an idea of a ballpark to start with, and because you can see some of them, you can actually see what they're trying to get to here. So a bit of Black Hole Sun sound there, but you know, by all means, give it a go, and it can be quite interesting as well. So let's click on one of these just to have a look. You see, you get the sound straight away, and you can see their configuration of what they think you should be, you know, using for this effect, which is quite useful as well. So let's have a look at this. I'm just going to solo that once. It's going to be in fact, let's just central it. So press C so you can see. So you got some quite unusual ones in there. Let me just get rid of them, and I'll just discard that out of the way and just start again from scratch rather than trying to take them out. Okay, so with this as our clean template, I'm going to go with a Mesa Boogie. This is quite a cool amp. Again, we could look at the EQing in here and take some stuff out, but let's just get a real ballpark to start with. I'm going to keep the matched cab, although that's cool. Well, let's go for a plexi on it. That sounds quite nice actually. And then, okay. Again, I'm going to go for the same amplifier. Let's put just to keep it the same. Bring up the tone a bit just to give a bit of tightness to it. We'll keep a matched signal there, a matched cab on there. I'm not going to worry about post effects at the moment, although we could try some, you know, perhaps a delay and reverb, sorry, in a bit. Okay, the other thing I probably would recommend, they're both, remember we looked at this on axis and off axis, so this is the microphone further away, and this from the speaker cone, this is the centre of the speaker cone. We could try bringing them away a bit, because remember, we haven't got to worry about phase issues, because the signals are panned hard left and hard right. So now that's quite nice, it gives a bit of separation, because the other one is I think off axis at the right on the speaker cone. just experimenting with different microphones. A bit of a delay there, but I'm running it off my battery, which hasn't got long left on the laptop, which probably isn't helping that. Okay. Let's try and level them up a bit. So we're happy with that sound. We've got to EQ some of this now. Well, there's not a massive amount of bass anymore, but you still got this. Do you remember we talked about this what they call the fundamental, or the main energy of the signal there around 100? That's going to be where my kick and my bass is and stuff like that. I don't want my guitar messing around with those frequencies too much. So I'm going to go to this EQ. I'm going to load in just a low pass, I think. Well, hold on, because remember we said about presets. Let's look at what it gives us for a guitar. Well, the last one I looked at was a rock guitar, so oh, there you go. So I clicked on rock guitar. If we look at the preset here, it's put a slight boost on there, and it's taken away some of that low. For my style of music I do, I'd be tempted even to cut a bit more away than that, but you know, so be it. That's great. It's a starting point. The beauty of mixing, and we've got now with DAWs, is you can go back, you can change things as you go, and you can listen on different speakers like I've got here on my laptop. I can take it on to play it through other people's studio monitors, take it wherever I go, listen to it and get an idea of my mix that way. So I'll just cut away some of these bass frequencies. So that's general EQing, an idea of general EQing. I want to show you as well surgical EQing. So I'm just going to central this. Sorry, let me just solo that one. Okay, we're going to use something called a surgical EQ, because this is quite a general EQ we're using here. If we go into Cubase and look at EQs, Studio EQ, there's a few that will do this in Cubase, but this Studio EQ, what I can do with this, I can actually, these are your different bands you can work with, so there's a few different areas we can work with, but I'm interested in these two middle ones to start with. You see we've got 1 and 2 here, and if I boost these up, you can actually see them moving it. So there's a couple of ways of moving these around, but what people would tend to do is use a very high small signal or bandwidth of an EQ and actually do what they call like sweep across this signal and see if we can hear anything that's I listen out for things that are whistling, or any frequency that's a standing frequency or something that sounds amiss, and then I'll try and take that frequency, perhaps reduce it a bit, and then I'll actually do this. See this invert here, so I'll invert it, and that is actually surgically taking out that bit of the unwanted frequency I don't want. You've got to be quite careful with this, because you don't want to end up with a mix that sounds too sterile. The beauty of a guitar is it's live, it's a real instrument, and if you go into too much depth with this, I kind of find sometimes you can take away the essence or the beauty of what a guitar is, which is it's a live beast, so to speak. So try not to do too much on this, but it's an interesting technique. Let me just solo channel 1. So these are your high frequencies. Sometimes they'll be quite slow. That sounds absolutely horrible, sorry. But can you see what I mean with that? That's probably a frequency I'm not too keen on. Although, having said that, when I hadn't boosted it, I hadn't noticed it particularly. So, but okay. So I've now used the reduction. So I've reduced it down. It's still a very small bandwidth, and I'm going to invert it. So without. That's when it comes apparent now. So when I without. I could just kind of hear it whistling away, and perhaps I wasn't so aware of it before. Now let's look at some of the lower frequencies. So again, make that band really small. too worried about any of these. There's a bit of sort of flabbiness there, definitely is there, but I'm kind of EQing some of that away, and I can I can do more of a cut on that later on. Okay, I'm not happy with that one. You can hear that's quite a resonant sort of, it's a frequency I'm not overly keen on. So again, I'm taking mass away, so I'm going to reduce this down and invert. Now, let me show you that's with my EQing now. If I take that off, so press this bypass, oh sorry, just as the music stops, you can hear that with you more aware of those funny little frequencies. Excuse me. Okay, I would do that with the next EQ as well, so do exactly the same thing. So let's do this really quick. Make the band really small. Oh, just remembered I'm not. Right, so that channel. Centralise it, because you want to hear from both speakers. Okay, sorry, get my mixer back up. Okay. Okay, here we go. Straight away, there you go, I don't want him. I don't know if that was roughly where I was before, it probably was on the last. Because I think I'd record this when I was away. I didn't use two different guitars or anything, I just put some ideas down. Okay. I'm very keen on him. Invert him out, so with, without. And again, I don't want to take masses away, just a little bit of a dip, just to get rid of those. Okay, really, before we go, so we've got a rough idea of our mixes now, so let's now pan these left and right again. And you might find that sounds really strange, but I'm thinking about how it's going to work with bass guitar as well in the future, so we'll perhaps record a bass and try it out. What I'd recommend as well before I go, obviously I'll show you the quick quad, and then I've got one recommendation to make a group channel as well. So I've now muted channel 3 and 4. Let's put amp rack on there. So just copying those across by just dragging them and pressing control as I go. Let's use the same EQ settings, and again, I'm just going to put a low pass, sorry, high pass on this, so a low cut, so okay. What I recommend with these is not a full pan, so but whatever you do, try and roughly do it the same. 76 fine. I'd also recommend bringing these two further down in the mix, so say we've got 4 guitars now that we're reasonably happy with. Obviously you can add effects to these as well. I've got no effects going on in here. By all means, have a look in your inserts and have a look in VST amp rack as well, adding a few effects, so because that can be quite useful. But what I would recommend is something they call a group track. This is where I'll do a whole video on group tracks, but I'm going to take all of these guitars, so every single one of these channel strips, I'm going to send them, instead of going straight to my stereo out, which is here, I'm going to send them to what they call a guitar bus or a mix bus. Well, it's actually a guitar bus, a mix bus comes later. So the way we do this, excuse me, project, add group channel. So remember, as we added the tracks before, we added audio tracks and MIDI tracks in past videos, we add a group channel. So we want it to be stereo because we're dealing with a left and right signal. and then you just name this guitars, return. And now if I go F3, look at my mixer, here you go, I've got a group channel. So it means whatever I do here will affect all the guitars, but the problem, it's not doing it at the moment, because I've got to go back to one of these guitars, look at the routing, or how it's routed through, and at the moment it's going to stereo out, but I've made a group channel, so I can go on these buttons here where it says my outputs, and I can just send them now to a guitar. So each one of these now, so 1, 2, 3, 4, are heading to my stereo out. So, sorry, not my stereo out, my guitar bus, my guitar group channel. So you can make, and I'll show you how I do this. In fact, I'll show you one of my templates where I've got group channels for most groups of instruments, so you can then use effects. And the other thing this adds is all going to one channel. So you've got say you've got 15 guitars and they're all going to a group channel, and use, say, a light compression on the whole group, and use perhaps a tape simulator maybe, or some EQing, whatever it may be. You're working with all of those channels and using the same EQ settings, the same settings, and it gives it unity. So it ties them in. They call it gluing together as well. So light compression and stuff is like a glue. It makes them sound cohesive together. So we'll experiment with all of them. I know the video's going on now. So, but now if I look at this, do you see here now? They're all going to this. So if I want to turn down the guitars, I can turn down all of the guitars in one go, rather than having to worry about all of those in all those individual channels. So they're all going to one group. And of course then we can look at adding perhaps a bit of a glue compression or a tape simulator. We'll look at that in a later video, but I hope that gives you a slight insight in how experiment with EQing, because this was very quick, but how I'd use surgical EQ and a standard EQ, how I would use amp rack, although I haven't gone into great detail, although how I would mix probably two guitars to make them sound different by using perhaps different amplifiers, or at least different cabinets and different mic placements on each one. And then don't forget you've got your sends down here as well, where we looked at before. I haven't got anything set up at the moment, but when we made the same way, when we made an effects channel, we made a reverb. Don't forget you can do that and then add sends to each one of these, or don't forget you can do that on, and if you want to use a reverb on all of them, just a light reverb, do it on. Now you've got your group channel. So we now know how to use amp rack, surgical EQing, just your standard EQing, but also how to group those together. So we can then look at how we can produce those tracks now to make them sound a bit more cohesive together. And then perhaps let's look at the correlation as well, how it's going to work with the bass guitar in the next lesson. Okay, good luck.